The morning bells rang across the dragon sanctuaries of Drakenheim, and Kale Thorn was already ankle-deep in muck. He gripped his shovel tighter and kept working. This was his life. Clean the stalls. Feed the beasts. Stay invisible. Around him, the massive creatures shifted in their enclosures. These were not the dragons from old Earth stories. These were something far more terrifying. Each one stood 3 stories tall, covered in scales that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Kale's skin crawl. The Galactic Council had found them on dead worlds, sleeping in ruins older than memory itself. Now they kept them here, studied them, used them as living weapons. Kale was nobody. An orphan with no records, no family, no future. The Zelthans who ran the facility barely looked at him. To them, humans were a young species barely worth noticing. Kale had learned to accept this. He had food, shelter, and work. That was more than many had. Boy. The pre-march vault needs inspection. The overseer's voice cracked like a whip. Kale's blood went cold. Nobody went to the pre-march vault. Ever. Sir, I think there's been a mistake, Kale said carefully. Do I look like I'm asking? Move. The Zelthan's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. Kale walked through corridors he had never seen before. The walls here were different, covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with faint light. His heart hammered in his chest. Everyone knew the stories. 3 dragons slept in the deepest vault. They were ancient beyond measure, powerful beyond understanding. And they had killed everyone who disturbed them. The vault door stood open. That was wrong. It was never supposed to be open. Kale stepped inside and froze. The chamber was vast, carved from a single piece of black stone. 3 enormous shapes lay in the darkness, each one larger than the dragons above. Frost covered their scales. Their breathing was so slow, so deep, that each exhale felt like distant thunder. He should leave. He should run. But something pulled him forward. A feeling he could not name. His feet moved on their own, carrying him closer to the nearest pre-march. She was beautiful in a terrifying way, her scales the color of starlight, her claws longer than Kale was tall. He reached out. His fingers touched her scales. The dragon's eye opened. Alarm screamed. Boots thundered in the corridor. Kale stumbled backward as the massive head lifted, rising higher and higher until it nearly touched the ceiling. The dragon looked at him and Kale felt something impossible. Recognition. Armed guards burst into the chamber, weapons raised. Step away from the pre-march, the commander shouted. You've just signed your death warrant, stable boy. The dragon moved faster than anything that large should move. Her wings swept out, a wall of scales and membrane, placing herself between Kale and the guards. The temperature in the room dropped. Ice formed on the walls. Then a voice filled Kale's mind. It was not sound. It was deeper than sound, older than words. At last, the keeper returns. Kale fell to his knees. His head felt like it would split open. Images flooded his mind. Humans and dragons flying together among the stars. A war that burned across galaxies. A terrible choice made in desperation. Secrets buried in human blood, hidden so deep that entire civilizations forgot they existed. The dragon's name whispered through his consciousness. Vexathon. The first. The eternal. The betrayed. I don't understand, Kale gasped. You will, Vexathon spoke again. Your kind and mine were meant to be one. They separated us. They made you forget. But your blood remembers, young keeper. Your blood remembers everything. The other 2 primarchs began to stir. Across the facility, every dragon started to roar at once. The sound shook the foundations of the sanctuary. Kale looked up at Vexathon, at her ancient eyes that held millennia of sorrow and hope. Everything he knew was a lie. And somehow, everything was about to change. Lord Commander Vraxus stood outside the vault, his 4 arms crossed in fury. Behind him, a dozen scientists waited with instruments that looked more like torture devices than medical tools. Kale sat on the cold floor, Vexathon's massive form curled protectively around him. That human will be studied, Vraxus hissed. Whatever genetic defect made the pre-march respond, we will find it and eliminate it. Vexathon's growl shook dust from the ceiling. Her mind touched Kale's again, gentler this time. They fear what you represent. What all your kind could become. Kale's head still throbbed with the visions she had shared. I'm just a stable boy. I don't understand any of this. Then let me show you the truth. The dragon's consciousness wrapped around his like a warm tide. Suddenly Kale was somewhere else, someone else. He saw ancient humans walking beside dragons that blazed with inner fire. Not as masters and servants. As partners. As 2 halves of one impossible whole. He saw the bond they called Heartfire. When human and dragon linked, they became something greater. The human gained strength, speed, and senses beyond imagination. The dragon gained something equally precious: focus, purpose, a connection to the creative spark that burned in human souls. Together they had been unstoppable. Then what happened? Kale whispered. The vision darkened. War came. Other species, jealous and afraid, united against them. They could not defeat bonded pairs in open battle, so they used a different weapon. A virus. Something that did not kill but rewrote. It buried the keeper genes deep in human DNA, locked them away behind barriers that would take thousands of years to break. The dragons had a choice: watch humanity die or let them forget. They chose survival over memory. We scattered ourselves across dead worlds and slept. Vexathon's voice was heavy with ancient grief. We waited for the barriers to weaken, for the keepers to return. We waited for you. Kale pulled back from the vision, gasping. Across the facility, alarms were screaming. Dragons were refusing orders. Some were breaking their chains. In orbit above the planet, Galactic Council warships were arriving. They're going to kill us, Kale said. All of us. Perhaps. Vexathon's eye gleamed. Unless you accept what you are. Unless you bond. I don't know how. Your blood knows. Your genes remember. All you must do is stop fighting it. Vraxis was shouting orders to cut through the vault door with plasma torches. Kale could hear the hiss and sizzle of superheated metal. He had minutes at most. He placed both hands on Vexathon's scales and stopped thinking. Stopped doubting. He felt for that pull he had experienced when he first touched her. That sense of rightness, of coming home. Fire exploded through his veins. Kale screamed. His body felt like it was being torn apart and rebuilt. His heart synchronized with the dragon's massive, slow rhythm. His lungs expanded, drawing in air that tasted like starlight and ice. His senses erupted outward. He could feel every dragon in the facility. He could sense their pain, their confusion, their desperate hope. The barriers in his DNA shattered like glass. Vexathon reared back and light poured from her scales. The ancient heart fire, dormant for millennia, blazed to life. The connection snapped into place with an audible crack that echoed through the vault. Kale stood. He felt different. Stronger. His eyes glowed with the same light as the dragon's. When Vraxis finally burst through the door, plasma rifle raised, he froze. The stable boy was gone. In his place stood something the galaxy had not seen in 10,000 years. A keeper. Fully awakened. Fully bonded. You made a mistake, Kale said, and his voice carried harmonics that made the Zelthans stumble backward. You shouldn't have woken us up. Behind him, the other two Primarchs opened their eyes. Across the planet, across the star system, every dragon heard the call. The age of forgetting was over. The keepers had returned. The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive station where representatives from 50 species gathered. Today, fear filled every corner of that ancient hall. Chancellor Moru of the Viridians slammed 3 of his appendages on the table. One human. One single bonded human has destabilized 17 dragon facilities across 9 sectors. In 3 days. Do you understand what this means? Vraxis stood before the council, humiliated and furious. The human calls himself Kale. He has somehow awakened what they call the Heartfire. Every dragon that comes near him falls under his influence. Not influence, corrected Ambassador Lythe, one of the few voices of reason. Recognition. The dragons are remembering their old bonds. Exactly. Moru's skin flushed dark purple with rage. And humans are everywhere. Billions of them, spread across 1,000 worlds. What happens when they all wake up? When every human becomes a potential keeper? The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood. Humanity had been kept weak, kept ignorant, because an awakened humanity would be terrifying. Humans bred fast, adapted quickly, and refused to accept limits. Bonded with dragons, they would reshape the galaxy. We need options, the Chancellor said quietly. I have already deployed the Razor Covenant, Vraxis admitted. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Razor Covenant was a legend, a team of assassins who had toppled empires. On Drakenheim, Kale felt the danger before he saw it. His bond with Vexathon had changed him in ways he was still discovering. One of those changes was sensing threats. Something's wrong, he told Dr. Sarah Chin, the human scientist who had chosen to help him instead of fleeing. She was one of the few humans at the facility who believed his story. Your instincts are probably right, Sarah said, scanning her datapad. I've been digging through old records. Kale, our DNA has been altered. Someone rewrote our genetic code thousands of years ago. They locked away the keeper traits deliberately. Before Kale could respond, the attack came. The poison was in his food. It should have killed him in seconds. Instead, his body burned it away like fuel. The heartfire bond made him nearly immune to toxins. Vexathon had sensed it immediately and flooded his system with counteragents. The orbital strike came next. Missiles rained from the sky, targeting the sanctuary. But the three Primarchs rose together, and their combined power created a dome of shimmering energy. The missiles exploded harmlessly against it. The infiltrator was the most dangerous. An android perfectly disguised as a maintenance worker. It got within 10 feet of Kale before his new instincts screamed a warning. He moved without thinking, faster than he had ever moved before, and caught the blade meant for his throat. The android's eyes widened in surprise. Impossible. You're still human. Not just human anymore, Kale said, and broke the machine in half with strength that shocked even him. But something else was happening. Something wonderful and terrifying. Across the galaxy, humans were waking up. A cargo pilot named Marcus felt a burning in his chest and suddenly understood a dragon's call from 3 systems away. A medical student named Yuki touched a juvenile dragon and gasped as heart fire ignited between them. A soldier, a teacher, a miner, a child, all feeling the pull of their forgotten heritage. Sarah showed Kale the reports flooding in. It's spreading. Your awakening triggered something. The genetic locks are breaking down everywhere. Hundreds of humans are becoming keepers. Maybe thousands. The Council will never allow this, Kale said. No, they won't. A new voice spoke. A Korthari general named Threx stepped into the room, his armor scarred from 100 battles. I came to warn you. The Council has voted. They're deploying the Omega fleet. What's that? Kale asked. Threx's expression was grim. Warships designed for one purpose. Dragon killing. They're going to exterminate every dragon in the galaxy. Without dragons there can be no keepers. Kale looked at Vexathon, feeling her ancient pain and determination through their bond. Then we fight, he said simply. The war for humanity's future was about to begin. The Omega fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons specifically designed to pierce dragon scales and disrupt their biological energy fields. Admiral Crescent commanded from the flagship, his orders simple and brutal. Kill every dragon. Leave no survivors. On Drakenheim, Kale stood on the highest tower of the sanctuary, wind whipping through his hair. Vexathon perched beside him, her massive form silhouetted against 3 rising moons. Through their bond he could feel her resolve. This was the moment they had both feared and prepared for. They'll destroy everything, Sarah said, standing behind him. She had refused to evacuate. Dozens of other humans had made the same choice. Former workers, scientists, even some guards who had seen the truth and could not unsee it. Not if I can help it, Kale said. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, further than he had ever reached before. The heartfire bond was not just with Vexathon anymore. It connected him to something vast and ancient, a network that spanned the stars. He sent out the call. Every dragon in the galaxy heard it. A sound that was not sound. A command that was not command. An invitation that could not be refused. Come home. Remember who you are. Remember what we were together. In chains on a prison world, dragons broke their restraints. In research facilities they burned through walls. On military bases they turned on their handlers and launched themselves into space. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. All heading toward Drakenheim. And with them came humans. Ships of every size and shape converged on the planet. Cargo haulers, personal shuttles, even stolen military vessels. Humans who had felt the awakening, whose keeper genes had finally broken free. They did not fully understand what was happening. They only knew they needed to be here. Marcus, the cargo pilot, arrived with 12 other awakening keepers. Yuki brought a transport full of civilians who wanted to help. More kept coming. An army assembling itself without orders, without organization, united only by instinct and ancient memory. General Threx watched the sensors in disbelief. There are thousands of ships incoming. Tens of thousands of dragons. How is this possible? Humanity doesn't quit, Sarah said with fierce pride. That's the one thing the Council forgot. We're stubborn. We adapt. And when you back us into a corner, we become dangerous. The Omega fleet opened fire. Space lit up with weapons fire. Missiles designed to seek dragon biosignatures. Energy beams calibrated to disrupt their molecular structure. The void became a killing field. But the dragons were not alone. Kale felt the moment the first true bonds formed. Marcus and a scarred dragon named Pyraxis merged their consciousness, and suddenly they moved as one. The dragon's raw power combined with human tactical thinking. They dodged attacks that should have been impossible to avoid and struck back with precision that made the fleet's computers scream warnings. More bonds ignited across the battlefield like stars being born. Each one made both human and dragon stronger, faster, better. They learned as they fought, remembered skills buried in genetic memory for millennia. Dragon fire, superheated plasma generated in chambers within their bodies, melted through advanced shields. Human creativity found weaknesses in ship designs, exploited them ruthlessly. The keepers learned to fly their dragons through impossible maneuvers, turning the vacuum of space into a three-dimensional battlefield where size and power mattered less than coordination and will. Ships exploded. Dragons fell. Humans died. The cost was terrible. But slowly, impossibly, the tide turned. Admiral Crescent watched his fleet falter and made a choice. He opened a channel that broadcast across the entire galaxy, to every human world, every station, every colony. People of humanity, he said, his voice shaking. Your council has lied to you. What you're seeing is the truth. Humans and dragons were meant to be together. Your ancestors were keepers. And someone took that from you. Kale heard the broadcast and smiled grimly. The secret was out. Now every human in the galaxy knew what had been stolen. The real awakening was just beginning. The battle ended not with a final explosion but with silence. The Omega fleet withdrew battered and broken. Half their ships were destroyed. The rest retreated through hyperspace, carrying the story of what they had witnessed. Humans and dragons fighting as one, unstoppable. But victory tasted like ash in Kale's mouth. He walked through the sanctuary grounds, past burn marks and debris. 43 dragons had fallen. 117 humans had died. He knew every name. Felt every loss through the network of bonds that now connected him to hundreds of keepers across the stars. Vexathon limped beside him, one wing damaged but healing. War always takes more than we wish to give, she said softly into his mind. The Galactic Council was in chaos. Some species demanded total war against humanity. Others sued for peace. A few quietly began backing away, unwilling to fight a species that had proven so dangerous when awakened. The careful balance of power that had existed for 10,000 years was crumbling. Sarah found Kale standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the valley where young dragons were learning to fly alongside their new human partners. They want to talk, she said. The council. They're asking for you specifically. They want me to make this stop, Kale said. To put humanity back to sleep. Can you? He thought about it. Through his bond with Vexathon he could probably send out a command. Ask the keepers to stand down. Maybe even suppress the awakening somehow. Return to the old ways where humans knew their place. I won't, he said simply. The peace talks happened on neutral ground, a station at the edge of known space. Kale arrived with Vexathon, Threx, and a dozen other representatives. The council members looked at him with fear, anger, and something that might have been respect. Chancellor Moru spoke first. What do you want, Keeper? I want what was stolen from us, Kale said. Not revenge. Not domination. Just the right to be what we were always meant to be. And if we refuse? Kale met his gaze steadily. Then you'll have war with a species that covers 1,000 worlds and can bond with creatures you can't kill. How do you think that ends? The silence was heavy. Threx stepped forward. Or we could choose wisdom. The keepers accord. Equal representation for humanity in the council. Full citizenship rights for dragons across all territories. Destruction of the genetic suppression technology. Those who cannot accept peace may withdraw to their own sectors. You're asking us to surrender power, another council member said. I'm asking you to share it, Kale corrected. Humans lived alongside you for millennia without knowing our true nature. We were peaceful. Productive. We only became dangerous when you tried to exterminate us. He paused. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to be free. The debate raged for 3 days. In the end, exhaustion and pragmatism won. The Keeper's Accord was signed. Not everyone was happy. Some species withdrew their membership and isolated themselves. Others stayed and grudgingly accepted the new reality. Humanity would never be the same. 6 months later, Kale stood in a rebuilt sanctuary, watching something that filled him with quiet joy. Children, human children no older than 6 or 7, were meeting dragons for the first time. Not as weapons or tools or exotic animals. As partners. As friends. A little girl with dark curls reached up fearlessly to touch a juvenile dragon's snout. The dragon, silver-scaled and curious, leaned down to meet her. Their eyes met. Light flickered between them. The first sparks of heart fire, small and new and full of promise. The girl laughed in delight. Vexathon's voice was warm in Kale's mind. This is what was stolen from both our kinds. Not dominion but partnership. Not power but understanding. Kale smiled, watching more children and dragons discover each other. Then we'll make sure it's never forgotten again. Above them, dragons soared through clear skies, their human partners laughing with pure joy. The age of forgetting was over. The age of remembering had begun.